How do you win an unwinnable war when the world has united against you? When you are trapped between two titans, each with a blade at your throat? How do you survive? The history books speak of the legendary generals and the first emperor, but they forget the secret, the impossible strategy born from the brink of annihilation. This is the story of the last alliance and the ruthless gambit that crushed it to forge an empire that would echo through eternity. In the 3rd century BC, the dying days of the Warring States period, a final storm gathers on a map of ancient China. Two great kingdoms, Zhao in the north and Chu in the south, glow with the menace of a secret pact, the last alliance. In fire and shadow, their generals seal a pact to strike simultaneously, to crush the state of Qin between them. But the shadows have eyes. The news travels like wildfire to the court of Qin, a death sentence delivered on a bamboo scroll. Yet, in the heart of the storm, the man who would be first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, does not tremble. Faced with an impossible two-front war, he makes a decision of breathtaking audacity. He will fight them both. Command is divided. To the veteran Wang Jian, the southern front, a wall of experience against the pride of Chu. To his aggressive son, Wang Ben, the north, a spearhead of ambition aimed at the heart of Zhao. The great gears of war begin to turn. The alliance strikes first, with the force of a tidal wave. In the south, the Chu navy emerges from the river mists like ghosts, their surprise attack forcing the Qin army back from the riverbank. Simultaneously, in the north, the legendary Zhao cavalry, a thunder of hooves on the plains, smashes against the Qin line, its terrifying momentum buckling the legions.
And ensure the watchtowers are manned. General, the Zhao vanguard is digging in at Long Way Pass. Tell the vanguard to test their defenses now.
Fronts, the Qin armies are forced into a disciplined but desperate retreat. The alliance's strategy is working perfectly. The Qin dragon is trapped, bleeding from 2 wounds.
The entire cavalry force thunders across the plains, massively avoiding each other.
Panic erupts. Ministers argue, their courage failing, but the emperor's will is iron. While his court trembles, he holds his gaze on the map, his faith in his generals, and his grand design absolute.
The army has launched a massive assault.
A new command is issued, a strategy of genius, born from desperation. To Wang Zhen in the south, defend, do not attack, do not win, simply hold. And so the southern army becomes a fortress of earth and patience. They dig in, refusing battle, frustrating the Chu, whose victory celebrations slowly sour into complacent boredom. a great river of steel and grain, the entire logistical might of the Qin state flows to one single point on the map, Wang Ben's army. The Zhao, confident they are winning, suddenly face an army that grows stronger with every passing day. The retreat ends. The line becomes an unbreakable wall of steel. The unstoppable Zhao charge is stopped dead, shattered against a forest of spears, and annihilated by a storm of crossbow bolts. Their spirit broken, the once proud cavalry flees in ruin. Wang Ben now holds the momentum, and through interrogation, he learns the enemy's final desperate gambit, a plan to flood the entire battlefield by breaking a strategic dam, a plan he now makes his own.
Hold the line! Pay up, you cheat! I'll get you next time. We cannot hold this line any longer. We must attack now, before it is too late. Retreat, I say. Unload the crates. Set the charges. Note about the diversion. Tell us where.
There, on the upstream dam.
Under the cover of darkness, an entire army moves like ghosts. While a diversionary attack draws the paranoid Zhao command's attention east, Wang Ben's main force seizes the high ground to the west. At the same time, an elite unit captures the river dam. All the pieces are in place.
Yes, this is the weakest point. Divert all reserves to the east. All the pieces are in place.
The trap is sprung. As the Zhao army scrambles to understand the deception, a signal is given. The dam does not explode. It collapses. The reservoir is unleashed. A man-made apocalypse, a tidal wave of unimaginable power roaring down the valley.
Now!
Flood smashes into the Zhao camp, obliterating an entire army in a single catastrophic blow. Before the survivors can even crawl from the mud, the black tide of the Qin legions descends from the hills. The battle is a slaughter. The capital of Handan, its walls undermined by the flood, surrenders without a siege. The state of Zhao is erased from the map.
Army, sound the charge.
over. But the Northern Army does not rest. They turn and begin the long march south. News of the victory reaches Wang Jian's patient fortress. For the first time in months, a roar of triumph erupts from the Qin camp, a sound that chills the blood of the complacent Chu army across the valley. Shattered by months of inaction, the Chu commanders watch in horror as the southern Qin army, an avalanche of black steel, descends from its fortress. And in their moment of panic, the unthinkable happens. The vanguard of Wang Ben's victorious Northern Army appears on the horizon, cutting off their retreat. Trapped, surrounded, the last alliance does not die in a final glorious battle. It simply dissolves. Father and son, the two generals Wang, meet in silence. Their impossible task is done. The war of armies is over. The final surrender is a mere formality. The warring states period has ended. Of Qin is revealed. The discipline that conquered kingdoms is turned to building an empire. The tools of war become the tools of peace. Roads that carried armies now carry merchants. The logistical machine that supplied the front lines now builds a great wall. A dozen scripts become one. A dozen kingdoms become a single people. Immortalized in earth, silent guardians of the man who willed it all into being. A legacy not just of conquest, but of creation.